Have you ever sat there looking at the most recent mainline Pokemon games that were released for their respective home consoles and then take a look at the older titles that released in the span of the mid-2000s and wonder to yourself as to what exactly went wrong in this current day and age? If there is one aspect of Pokemon that grabs the player's attention, it's the battles. How did we go from something like this to this? How did the camera angles go from this to this? Consistency is just non-existent in this franchise, unfortunately, and while the topic of Pokemon graphics is always deemed to be one of the most popular types of discussions fans have amongst themselves, it really makes you think if there will ever be a time where this changes for the better of the future of projects releasing. Now, as there are many things that one can talk about in regards to this topic, I wanted to focus on the battling aspect of this discussion because it truly is something abysmal and often said by the majority of the fans unacceptable in today's enhanced level of development that is accessible and doable for companies to utilize their products, especially when we are talking about a franchise that has been around for this long, Pokemon. Home consoles, the pinnacle of what is deemed the most effective type of entertainment system one can have, and to have that system be the source of some of the best games companies can offer to their player base to experience. You have the Nintendo 64 that followed up with the releases of Stadium 1 and 2, the GameCube followed up with Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, the Wii followed up with Battle Revolution, the Switch followed up with nothing? Isn't the Switch considered a home console too? Where did it go wrong? Ladies and gentlemen, a company behind some of the masterpieces that some of us hold to our hearts dearly, and the group responsible for establishing a foundation of future titles to follow suit, Genius Sonority. I really don't see a whole lot of recognition or talk revolving around them, and I believe they really do deserve a lot of praise for being able to create experiences like no other when it comes to one of the core aspects of Pokemon, being the battles itself. I sincerely apologize if I mispronounce any names in this video, but meet Manabu Yamana, the person behind Genius Sonority. If you were a fan of the Dragon Quest games, he also had involvement in them too, while also working with other industry legends such as Akira Toriyama, may he rest in peace. But as time went on, he would go to direct Colosseum, XD, and Battle Revolution, followed up with a stacked team with incredible talent such as Tsukasa Towada, the music director for these games, Yoshiaki Iwasawa, who also assisted in directing, and so much more. This team alone accomplished what is agreed upon to be some of the best pieces of Pokemon work that still holds up to this day. It's an absolute shame at how underutilized they have become as the years went on. Yes, that indicates that they are still around, and in fact they still assist with the main series games, but to an extent. Our most recent titles being of course Scarlet and Violet have led some fans to believe that new possibilities could be made for the future, and what they mean by that is because when they are finally taking Pokemon to a new home console as opposed to being on handhelds, then we could perhaps see a Battle Revolution successor in the making, only for us to be met with some of the most disappointing visuals from a battling perspective. Let's just observe what's going on in Scarlet and Violet. The past 3D game's height scaling is non-existent here, and it hasn't been even with Sword and Shield. You have a whale that looks like a plush, and a Pokemon that looks like it's been suffering from back problems since they were a teenager, barely at its appropriate height to make it look menacing. I'm sorry, Mahoan Bros. You bring a Pokemon that's somehow bigger in size than a Kyogre like Dondozo, and all of a sudden the camera can't even showcase all the Pokemon on the field. You got the Pokemon looking at each other and roaring whenever the opponent switches out. It makes sense if they were defeated, but why if they switch out too? I just feel like it's a bit out of touch. I get that they're trying to add details here, but if you're going to attempt it, then at least try to make it make sense. I miss having actual close-up shots of the trainers throwing out their Pokeballs, and don't get me wrong, they do, but the camera angle just doesn't do it justice at all, especially with the Pokemon being sent out. It just looks really sloppy. When we compare physical attacks and special attacks, the special attacking moves are the only ones that look decent, while there is actually hardly any life brought to using physical moves compared to the past titles. Legends Arceus had close-up ranges when using physical attacks, but even that didn't look all too good either. Keeping a realistic approach to open world battling just continues to hinder the presentation of these battles, which also is what I believe ruins what could have been a properly functionable, presentable battle. Am I complaining too much, or do people understand how I feel? I genuinely don't even know. Forget the development time, forget the storylines, forget the environmental visuals, but what on earth is this? To cut the decks and praise at how much the animations were going to be an improvement was probably the biggest joke of the century. To take one of the best performing companies and completely shaft them to making puzzle games instead in 2024 is some of the most disrespectful treatment I've ever seen in this industry, and if you take a look at it now, Nintendo/Pokemon are suffering from it. I don't want to divert from the main topic at hand, but we've seen the atrocity of what Scarlet and Violet became, and will they use that experience to actually make considerable changes for the future? Probably not. As much as I want to give Game Freak credit for giving us some of the best Pokemon games out there, but when you're unable to deliver the same quality treatment as another company who nailed the formula and could only progress forward, just speaks volumes here. But I want to put something into perspective for you guys really quickly. If Genius Sonority time crunched themselves to an oblivion to push out Battle Revolution within the first month of the Wii's release to be in sync with the release of Diamond and Pearl at the time, and the visuals went this crazy on a game that was released in 2006 compared to a 3-year development cycle of a released mainline game on another home console that they can hardly optimize and make it look relatively decent? But nah, let's have Game Freak handle it, and it'll probably take another 5 generations for them to actually figure it out. I'm actually worried at how battles are going to look in Legends ZA, but I guess I should just continue to keep my expectations very low when it comes to that regard. Here is another example. This is a prototype build of Battle Revolution, and now bear with me, this footage is super old, which is why it's so blurry, but look at the concept for how the camera pans to each Pokemon, and how the camera captures everything perfectly, from the attacks being used and how it smoothly transitions to the trainer showcasing an animation to command their Pokemon. Hyper Beam interacts with the environment, leaving a devastating blow at the end. This never made it to the final build given the time crunch they had going on for them, but I would imagine it would have been made possible as an end product, especially on a Wii. With the Switch 2 now officially announced to be discussed soon, I can only wonder if this actually changes anything. We've seen the constant discourse of how different games look on the Switch compared to Pokemon, and with the announcement of an updated home console that's 6 years old at the time of this recording, can Game Freak actually bring it together? I genuinely want to see what Genius Sonority could have done if they were given the resources and time to make a 3D Pokemon game without intervention, but that's a timeline for a different lifetime, I guess. Manabu Yamana, I consider you an actual industry legend. You truly shaped Pokemon to what it could have been for the better. I truly wish Genius Sonority will be given the opportunity it deserves to develop a Pokemon game regardless to what degree or aspect that might be, because your past work on previous titles, I have no reason to believe that if given the chance, then Pokemon could truly be taken to a different direction for the better of the series. I never took your work for granted, but I'm sure many have, and I know the Pokemon Company has for sure. You are a pinnacle pillar of the fans, and I truly thank your efforts for giving us such fantastic titles while also giving us the best possible battling experiences a player could have. I look forward to seeing the future of Genius Sonority, and to know that there is a group out there that will always remember your accomplishments and will always want the best. I hope the Pokemon Company will take their past mistakes and pass it on to incredible talent, but at the end, thank you, Genius Sonority. This company deserves better.